Deep in the heart of Brazil, life and death play out daily at a small pond. Birds hustle for a quick snack. Caimans dine on easy prey and share their home with an unusual family of rodents. Capybaras are not your typical rats or squirrels. They're the size of sheep. When you are on everyone's menu, size matters. One of the world's largest tropical wetlands is in the heart of South America. It's a land of giants. Home to the jaguar, the biggest wild cat in the Americas. The longest parrot. And giant otters. And what might be the strangest giant of them all? The capybara, the largest rodent on Earth. They call the Pantanal home. It's a vast low-lying wetland stretching across central western Brazil, eastern Bolivia, and eastern Paraguay. It's 10 times larger than the Everglades. In the north, where the wooded grasslands known as Cerrado meets the wetlands of the Paraguay River Basin, a quiet pond is the perfect hangout for a group of semi-aquatic capybaras. It's the dry season, and this large group has more than a dozen babies to raise and keep safe. Most capybaras are born at the end of the wet season, when the floodwaters start to recede. There are lots of nutritious grasses for these herbivores to eat. And there's still plenty of water, so each group can claim its own pond. It's the perfect time for the pups to learn the skills needed to survive in their half-aquatic and half-terrestrial world. Giant capybaras are found only in South America. And their unusual anatomy and behavior intrigued the early explorers. They thought they were a new kind of pig. But these strange-looking animals are built for this environment. Their webbed toes are a big advantage in the water. Positioned high on their heads, their eyes and ears can scan their surroundings for predators, even when they are in water. They're also big. Adult capybaras are 4 feet long and weigh 120 pounds. This group has 30 members and is led by a dominant male. He's the guy with the largest scent gland on his nose. It's called a marillo, and he uses it to mark the group's territory by rubbing it against branches and grasses. Scent marking also helps to maintain the strict social hierarchy amongst the males. When the dominant male dies, the next in line in the hierarchy assumes the number 1 position. There's no fighting involved. All the females in the group mate with the dominant male and give birth at about the same time. Synchronized births reduce the risk of individual predation. The more animals in a group, the lower the risk of being caught by a predator. That's because everyone is vigilant. Unlike most rodents, capybara pups are born covered with fur and with their eyes open. They need to be ready for the world because they are on a lot of menus. In the water, they're a quick bite for a caiman or an anaconda. And on land, they're a good meal for smaller predators, like the ocelot and birds of prey. Getting big fast is an important part of their defense strategy. It takes them off the menu of some of the smaller predators. So they'll need to consume a lot of calories over the coming months. Soon after birth, they are up and about and even learn to eat grass while still suckling. All the females share the nursing duties. During the first 16 weeks of their lives, a young capybara can go to any female and suckle. These youngsters need to bulk up, and the sooner, the better. Because only about 1/3 will make it past their first year. The capybaras share this pond with many other animals. It's still early in the dry season, so there are lots of ponds to choose from. Aside from the odd caiman, the pond attracts a crowd that's no threat for the capybara. This elegant whistling heron is a regular. This is his hunting ground, and he works it like a ninja. Waggling his pale throat distracts his prey. Stealth and precision are a lethal combination. Every move this whistling heron makes yields a prize. This time, it's a juicy beetle. On the other side of the pond, a limpkin family is on a field trip. Their diet mostly consists of mollusks, like freshwater clams and apple snails. And the best place to find them is at the water's edge. That's where this family is headed. The parents have 2 chicks in tow. Just a few weeks ago, when the clutch hatched, there were 4. The neighborhood's toucans scooped up the other two. In North America, these bright-colored birds liven cereal boxes. But here in the Pantanal, they have a bad reputation. They're notorious nest plunderers. The remaining two chicks stay close to their parents. The birds are so light and the bed of water hyacinths so thick, it can support their weight. Today, they're learning to find mollusks. The mother limpkin uses her bill as a wedge to pry the clam open. Her long bill is perfect for removing the flesh. The other chick is trying to apply the lesson, but its bill isn't long or strong enough. So it tries an apple snail. It'll be a month or so before its bill develops a gap, just before the tip. Then it can use it like tweezers to pull out the snail. The tip itself is curved slightly to the right, so it can be slipped into the right-handed chamber of snails. Limpkins love apple snails, so it's just as well there are lots of them in the Pantanal. That's because the female can lay up to 15,000 eggs a year. These snails are the unsung heroes of the wetlands. They lay their eggs above the water during the dry season. The bright pink is a warning to would-be predators. They contain a powerful neurotoxin. The young hatch after 2 or 3 weeks and drop into the water below. Large snails are a delicacy for many species of birds, like these jabiru storks, and even caimans. A pile of shells is all that remains of one snail kite's dinner. Beyond their role, feeding much of the food chain, these snails are the Pantanal's recyclers. Apple snails stay underwater, using their fish-like gills to take oxygen out of the water. Millions of apple snails consume decaying plants in the ponds and lakes and turn it into a top-notch fertilizer. The rich cocktail of nutrients they produce provides a fertile soil for the vegetation, like water lilies and water hyacinths. The flora, in turn, puts oxygen back into the water. Without apple snails, this water world would suffocate. It's the peak of the dry season. And the capybara's pond seems to sizzle under the noonday sun. As temperatures soar, the group finds ways to protect themselves from the sun and the heat. Their thin hair makes them prone to sunburn. So they cake themselves in mud. It acts like a sunblock. This capybara took it one step further. He has a nice wig. Capybaras have very few sweat glands, and because they are so large, they can overheat easily. That's why they spend so much of their time immersed in water. It helps them regulate their body temperature and keep cool. These long periods of rest also allow them to digest a diet high in fiber and low in nutritional content. An adult capybara eats about 6.5 pounds of vegetation a day. The capybara's menu would make a vegan proud. Their name means master of the grasses in Guarani, the original language shared by the indigenous tribes of the region. They're herbivores that graze on grasses and aquatic plants, as well as the odd fruit or even tree bark. To get the benefits of the nutrients locked up in all that tough-to-digest cellulose, capybaras give it a second pass through their digestive systems. Like rabbits, they eat their fecal pellets. Like cows, theirs is a very efficient digestive system, and all the nutrients will eventually get processed. Gas bubbling up to the surface is a side effect of digesting all that roughage. A quiet nap is interrupted by a caiman. The caiman is no real threat for this adult. But capybaras are a cautious bunch. Best to swim away. Capybaras are very good swimmers. It's a useful defensive tactic. Once underwater, they can stay submerged for 5 minutes without surfacing. Their small ears have a mobile fold that closes the ear canal, a trick that helps them evade predators. Their fatty tissue makes them buoyant, so they can venture into deeper water to feed. It's an ability that this cattle tyrant finds helpful. Cattle tyrants are flycatchers. And and they can spot a good opportunity when they see one. When capybaras are on the move, they catch a ride. As the capybaras make their way through vegetation, whether on land or in the water, they flush insects, which the cattle tyrant is quick to nab. And at this time of year, these birds are in luck. The pond is packed with insects. The still water is the perfect breeding ground for many kinds of insects. Predatory insects like dragonflies hunt for mosquitoes and midges that come to the pond to breed. They can eat their own weight in about 30 minutes. When dragonfly eggs hatch in the water, they become nymphs and food for frogs, fish, and a host of other species. In turn, they attract birds like this sun bittern. They mostly feed on small frogs and small crustaceans like crayfish and shrimp. And they'll never say no to a snack of insects. The surefire stalk and strike technique is similar to that of herons. But unlike herons, they never venture too far into the water. The insects that don't fear the sun bittern are honeybees. They use the mud banks to load up on salt to supplement their diet. These bees are naturalized honeybees from Europe and have been here for hundreds of years. Locals call them western bees, and they produce most of the Brazilian honey. In recent years, they've been upstaged by a new super bee. This massive hive is home to over 80,000 Africanized honeybees, also known as killer bees. Africanized bees are resilient, disease-resistant, and very productive. They're also extremely aggressive. They attack their enemies in swarms of thousands. In the 1950s, Africanized bees were taken to Brazil. The plan was to crossbreed these heat-tolerant bees with the local populations of western honeybees to increase honey production. But in 1957, 26 Africanized queens escaped, along with a swarm of worker bees. Since then, they have colonized the continent and traveled as far north as California. Now, they kill more humans than any other animal in the Pantanal. A few steps away, where the bed of water hyacinths is thicker, the limpkin chicks are doing a good job, imitating their parents' hunting techniques. So good, in fact, that the parents decide to explore the other side of the pond. This leaves the chicks vulnerable. The Yakari caiman is a small crocodile. It has a varied diet: apple snails, small mammals, fish, and birds. In seconds, the limkin's brief absence turns into a parent's worst nightmare. The caiman has one of the chicks. The pair shrieks loudly, trying to distract the caiman into releasing their chick. The caiman pays no heed and swallows the chick whole. Now the family is down to one chick. As the sun sets on the Pantanal, it's time to find shelter for the night. The limkins need to find a safe roost in the trees, and the capybaras head into the bush. A new day dawns in what's often called Brazil's Serengeti, and welcomes a primordial chorus.
To really feel and experience the Pantanal, you need to live the sun rising and the sun setting. For me, awakening in this environment with the sounds and the colors and the smell, it's something magic. It's an orchestra. It's a symphony. And I love to walk during this time, doing my morning prayers and enjoying this place.
Andrea von Turoni fell in love with this place over 40 years ago. He had an engineering degree, but after a few months at a 9-to-5 job, he decided that wasn't for him. So he packed his bag and tried his hand as a guide on nature expeditions. Eventually, he found the Pantanal.
It was something amazing. I mean, it's such a huge space, so much wildlife, so much freedoms. So this sensation of being lost and at the same time having found myself was what gave me the strength to decide to give up living in a big city and follow my soul.
Now Andrea is an ardent conservationist and runs an eco-lodge for tourists. He had these boardwalks built so visitors can experience the wetlands without a boat and its noisy motor.
Aqui a gente vê anta. Quando não tiver essas folhagens, passa aqui a camanduá. Epa, jacaré e capivara, né? É o básico. Ah, e cervo. Naquela lagoa ali passa cervo.
Despite being the largest native deer in South America, marsh deer are one of the pond's shyest visitors. They aren't in competition with the capybaras for food, as deer are browsers, not grazers. They prefer the leaves and stems of bushes and trees. Their antlers span more than 1.5 feet and weigh up to 4.5 pounds. But unlike North American deer, the antlers are mostly ornamental and are not used for fighting other males to win access to breeding females. Marsh deer have been labeled vulnerable on the world's endangered species list. The Pantanal is one of the last places on Earth where they're protected. After early morning grazing and napping near their pond, the capybaras move on to a new patch for lunch. During the day, they follow a pretty regular schedule. Meandering between their pond and different grazing areas. The females are in charge of the young ones. While the dominant male keeps an eye out for the entire group, as do the other adults. Capybaras can travel far, but always in short bursts. On average, a group roams in a territory that's between 12 and 50 acres. But when they move from one feeding spot to the next, they rarely travel more than 200 yards at a time. Their new grazing is near a river. For a highly aquatic animal, this is a bonus. The group fans out. Even this juvenile, barely 3 months old. He's found a patch of grass that he can claim for his own. No one pays attention as the patch is parched. It's his for the taking. Now he's hidden from the group's watchful eyes and hasn't noticed that something else has him in its sights. Capybaras can live for about 4 years in the wild. They rely on the group to survive. By moving away from his group, this youngster may have sealed his fate. One of the lookouts signals danger. The group quickly heads for the safest place, the river. Capybaras can swim faster than jaguars. They reach the other bank safe and sound. The Pantanal is a wilderness, and you need to be smart to survive. It's an advantage to have a group to rely on. For some species, the biggest threat is not from a natural predator.
Nós temos grande problema no Brasil e no mundo, que é a coisa dos pets, da criação de animais silvestres para o gozo das pessoas, de ter como decoração. Então, nós aqui temos um programa que nós começamos em 2010, que é a reintrodução de psitacídeos coletados pelo tráfego e estamos fazendo um esforço de fazer eles voltarem à natureza.
The focus of Andrea's program is the endangered hyacinth macaw. These birds belong in the wild. Yet they're routinely caught by poachers, smuggled to cities in Brazil and beyond, and sold for high prices on the international market.
Então esse blue é um deles. Não é um animal de domesticação. Ele foi solto para voltar a ser selvagem, para voltar a se integrar, né? Se a gente puder arrumar uma namorada para ele, vai ser muito bom. Ele tem uma namoradinha que aparece aqui, mas ele fica envergonhado.
He understands their personalities. It isn't very scientific, but it seems to work. Blue is the 6th macaw Andrea welcomed into the refuge. And Blue's got lots to learn.
Primeiro, ensinar ele a comer. Ele não sabe comer. Ele nunca abriu um acuri. O segundo é se reconhecer como arara. Então, tem umas outras araras que vêm visitar ele e ele se assusta.
This is Joao, another resident of the sanctuary. He's the first hyacinth macaw Andrea took in. And he just found a mate. It took a few years before he would even try to mingle with the wild macaws. Still, this bird has a lot to learn. He's probably one of the clumsiest sex partners in the Pantanal. Hopefully, he'll get the hang of it soon and help to raise his own family. This is Sebastian. He arrived at the refuge a couple of years ago. He still can't break into an akuri nut. If Sebastian had grown up in the wild, he'd know how to use a twig as a tool to pry open the kernel inside to get at the nut. It's the kind of knowledge that parents pass on. But these macaws are starting from scratch.
Ele tem comportamento meio de cachorro, mas eu tenho fé que nós vamos conseguir fazer ele.
Andrea never planned on being a conservationist, but when you fall in love with the Pantanal, it's part of the job description. By late afternoon, the sun is still strong. But this close to the equator, there's only a few hours of daylight left. Just enough time for this group of capybaras to find a new feeding spot before they take shelter in the forest for the night. Their next stop is the edge of Andrea's ecolodge property, which is also a cattle ranch. Most of the Pantanal's wetlands are privately owned. For over 200 years, they've been used as pasture by generations of ranchers. There are fences, but they're used to contain the cattle and are no obstacle for capybaras. Like the wildlife, the cowboys contend with the drastic seasonal changes. During the dry season, the cattle roam from one lowland pasture to the next. In late September, before the wet season takes hold and the low plains are flooded, the herd is taken to higher ground. Once the cattle have moved on, it's the capybara's turn. Their long front incisors allow them to crop the grass even shorter. Like other rodents, their teeth keep growing to compensate for the wear from constant grinding. They chew their food by grinding back and forth, rather than side to side. It's very effective, as they turn the tough grasses to a paste. And just like at the pond, there's a bird happy to see this group of capybaras venturing into the pasture. It's a black cowbird, one of the capybara's top groomers. It pulls out the ticks and other parasites that shelter under the hair on their skin. It's a free meal for the cowbird and a day at the spa for the capybaras. It's something that Andrea has seen many times, but it never fails to entertain him.
It's fantastic because the capybara lays down, puts his hair up, and it's almost, I mean, it's something really funny to see. This blackbird is really helping to free him from all these insects.
Andrea is not a wildlife biologist, but he's been observing capybaras here for over 40 years. They're his neighbors. One of his other favorites are the howler monkeys.
I think that we can learn from them. They don't spend energy as most of the animals unnecessarily. They're vegetarians. They basically eat only fresh leaves. They're very loving to each other. They're very caring. They carry on a very interesting family life. The male cares about the young ones. And when they are grown up, the male is dark black and the female is kind of yellow. But when they are young, they have the same color. And often you find in nature a group of black howler monkeys, a group of boys alone going around in search of girls like us.
Howler monkeys are leaf eaters. And their poor diet means that when they aren't eating, they're snoozing. With one very noticeable exception. They call, or rather bellow their location to other howler troops. When they are awake, you know it. They can be heard from as far away as 3 miles. And that makes them the loudest land mammals in the world. The Pantanal is a study in contrasts. It's a place where sleepy primates make the most noise, where tiny snails regulate one of the world's largest tropical wetlands, and where tame hyacinth macaws learn to be wild again. The Pantanal is one of the last big wildlife frontiers on this planet. And as long as conservationists like Andrea are around, these wetlands will keep attracting animals and animal lovers.
Often I have people who walk in here at the lodge and they have just arrived and then they say, "Oh, what a fantastic place." I mean, they haven't seen anything. They have just felt. They have felt the wholeness of this place that is a combination of flora and wildlife and the whole togetherness.
The capybara's world and their pond may be a small one, but these slow and dignified, highly social animals have evolved a gentle lifestyle to survive in their complex and dangerous world in the Pantanal.